Colonel Emma Brooks strolled into a modest supermarket on what seemed like a serene weekend afternoon in Austin, Texas. Clad in a simple white shirt, well-fitted blue jeans, and a pair of sneakers, she blended effortlessly into the bustling crowd of regular shoppers. Her unassuming appearance gave no hint of her remarkable background, a decorated military officer who had spent her entire career commanding troops and safeguarding her nation on perilous battlefields. For Emma, moments like these, peaceful and solitary, were a rare luxury. She found solace in browsing the aisles, selecting everyday essentials with deliberate care, as if each item symbolized a fragment of normalcy in her otherwise demanding life. But this moment of tranquility was shattered by an incident so small yet so revealing of human character. At the far end of the aisle, a tall man in a neatly pressed police uniform, Officer Paul Smith, unintentionally knocked over a packet of noodles and a bottle of soft drink. The items tumbled onto the floor, creating a minor but noticeable mess. Emma, observing from a distance, watched as Paul glanced at the mishap with apparent indifference. Without so much as a pause, he turned and walked away, leaving the spill behind as if it was someone else's problem. Emma's military training had instilled in her a sharp eye for detail and an unyielding sense of accountability. Paul's casual disregard for the mess he had caused ignited a spark of irritation within her. She couldn't ignore it. Stepping forward with calm determination, she addressed him in a clear, steady voice. "Excuse me, sir. You dropped something back there. Perhaps you should pick it up to avoid inconveniencing others." Instead of an apology or acknowledgement, Paul turned toward her with a cold, disdainful expression. His eyes swept over her as though she were insignificant. A mocking smile tugged at his lips as he replied, "Who do you think you are to tell me what to do? I don't have time to waste on trivial nonsense like that." The arrogance in his tone was palpable, but Emma remained composed. Her eyes locked onto his with unwavering seriousness as she responded, "As a police officer, you have a duty to set an example for the community. Picking up what you dropped isn't just polite. It shows respect for others and for the uniform you wear." Her words were firm yet respectful, a gentle reminder of the values he was supposed to uphold. However, Paul seemed unmoved. His sarcastic retort stung with dismissiveness, and he continued to belittle her with offensive comments. What began as a minor incident had now drawn the attention of nearby shoppers. The once quiet aisle was alive with murmurs as curious onlookers turned their heads. Some even began recording the confrontation on their phones, sensing the tension brewing. Emma was acutely aware of the eyes on her, but she stood tall and resolute, unshaken by the weight of public scrutiny. Paul's posture remained defiant, his face twisted with contempt. He stood motionless, his refusal to act only amplifying his smug demeanor. Though anger simmered within Emma, years of leading soldiers in high-pressure situations had taught her the value of staying calm and composed. She took a steadying breath, her voice as measured as it was resolute. "This may seem insignificant to you, sir, but it's about more than picking up a few items. Wearing that uniform carries responsibility. People look to you as an example, and actions like this reflect on more than just you. They reflect on your profession." Paul laughed derisively, shaking his head. "You think you know what it means to wear this uniform, huh? You don't have a clue. This is a waste of time. Maybe you should focus on your own problems instead of lecturing me." The mocking laughter grated on Emma, but she refused to let it derail her resolve. Around them, the crowd continued to grow, phones capturing every word and movement. Emma's heart burned, not just with frustration at Paul's irresponsibility but with a deeper sense of injustice. His dismissive attitude echoed the societal prejudices and systemic issues she had battled throughout her career. This wasn't just about a spill in a supermarket. It was about accountability, respect, and the example set by those in positions of authority. Emma's expression hardened, her gaze unyielding as she stared directly at Paul. Her voice softened, but it carried a weight that silenced the murmurs around them. "You're misjudging me," she said, her tone steady but powerful. "The way you act now doesn't just affect me. It reflects on you and everyone who looks up to you. Actions, no matter how small, have consequences." Paul sneered, clearly unimpressed, but Emma's determination didn't waver. Beneath her calm exterior, she resolved to stand her ground, not just for herself, but for the principles she had spent a lifetime upholding. This moment was no longer about a single confrontation. It was a stand against the apathy and arrogance that eroded respect and integrity in society. Colonel Emma Brooks, a woman of exceptional resilience and dignity, stood firm in the face of Paul's unrelenting arrogance. This wasn't merely a confrontation over spilled groceries. It had become a moment for her to stand up, not only for herself but also for the values she had spent a lifetime defending. Emma's heart burned with a quiet fury, but she didn't allow her emotions to overpower her. Her gaze was icy and unyielding as it met Paul's sneering eyes, which were filled with contempt and mockery. Paul, towering and defiant, seemed to relish the tension. His sarcastic smile betrayed his expectation that Emma would lose her composure, that her anger might explode into a scene he could use against her. But Emma, a seasoned commander with years of battlefield experience, chose reason over rage. Her voice, calm yet commanding, broke the silence. "I'm not here to argue with you," she said, her tone steady and authoritative. "I'm here to remind you that your actions, not just today but every day, reflect the kind of person you are, especially as a police officer. You should know better than anyone else what responsibility means." Emma's words struck a chord, drawing the attention of the onlookers who had paused their shopping to witness the exchange. Conversations ceased, carts were abandoned, and a palpable tension filled the air. Paul, sensing the weight of the gazes now fixed on him, felt his composure waver for a brief moment. However, he quickly masked his discomfort with more arrogance, letting out a harsh, echoing laugh that reverberated through the aisle. "Responsibility?" Paul sneered, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "And who are you to lecture me about responsibility? You're nothing more than a mediocre woman, a nobody. Don't think you have the right to stand here and tell me how to do my job." His words, laden with prejudice and malice, hit Emma like a cold wind. Yet, rather than faltering, she steadied herself, drawing upon the inner strength that had carried her through countless challenges. She met his disdain head-on, her voice calm but weighted with conviction. "I don't need you to understand who I am," she said, her tone measured but powerful. "But I do need you to understand this. Every person in this society deserves respect, regardless of their role or position. If you can't uphold that simple truth, then perhaps it's you who doesn't deserve the uniform you're wearing." The onlookers, captivated by the unfolding drama, held their breath in anticipation. Emma's words carried a gravity that seemed to momentarily silence even Paul's defiant laughter. But he soon recovered, doubling down on his contempt. "What do you think you can do to me?" he barked, his voice rising in mockery. "I'm a policeman. The law is on my side, and you're just an ordinary woman of color. You should know your place before you get yourself into trouble." Emma didn't flinch. The crowd, sensing the tension, grew quieter, their collective attention fully fixed on the standoff. She felt their eyes on her, their silent support lending her strength. This wasn't just a personal battle anymore. It had become a test of character, a clash of values. Emma stood tall, her shoulders square, her expression unyielding. "You may have power," she said, her voice steady and deliberate, "but power isn't a license to belittle or abuse others. If you think your authority excuses your behavior, you're gravely mistaken." Paul's confidence faltered, his sneering mask slipping as he saw the unwavering resolve in Emma's eyes. The crowd, now fully invested, began whispering among themselves, some pulling out phones to document the scene. Emma took a step forward, her voice cutting through the murmurs like a blade. "This isn't about me versus you," she said. "It's about standing up for what's right, for the values that should guide us all. Fairness, respect, and accountability." Paul, desperate to regain control, snarled, "Don't play noble with me. You're nothing but a troublemaker, and if I wanted, I could have you thrown out of here right now." Emma's calm demeanor didn't waver. A faint smile flickered across her lips, not of amusement but of quiet defiance. This confrontation wasn't just about personal pride. It was a pivotal moment for Emma to stand tall, defending the principles she had dedicated her life to. Though anger bubbled inside her, Emma's military discipline kept it tightly in check. Her piercing gaze locked onto Paul, cold and unwavering. She didn't flinch, not even under the weight of his sarcastic smile and the contempt gleaming in his eyes. It was as if Paul was daring her to lose her composure, but Emma knew better than to take the bait. Instead of succumbing to fury, Emma drew upon the reason and poise of a seasoned commander. Her voice was calm, yet carried the weight of authority. "I'm not here to argue," she said firmly. "I'm here to remind you that your actions, no matter how trivial they seem, reflect on you as a police officer. You should understand your responsibilities better than anyone else." Emma's sharp words caused a ripple of interest among the onlookers. Shoppers began abandoning their carts, clustering at the edges of the aisle to witness the unfolding scene. The supermarket, once filled with the hum of casual chatter, now buzzed with anticipation. Paul, sensing the weight of the crowd's scrutiny, puffed himself up, trying to mask his discomfort with an air of arrogance. He laughed, the sound ringing out harshly in the confined space. "Responsibilities," he sneered, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "And who are you to lecture me? Just some mediocre woman, nothing more. Don't think you have the right to stand here and tell me what to do. You don't know the first thing about my job." His words cut deep, laced with sexist and dismissive undertones. But Emma, though momentarily stung, did not let his insults rattle her. She took a steadying breath, her resolve hardening. She knew her response had to be measured, for every word she spoke was now being scrutinized by a silent, attentive audience. "I don't need you to understand who I am," she replied, her voice steady yet powerful. "But you should understand that every person in this society deserves respect. And if you can't show that, then perhaps it's you who doesn't deserve the uniform you wear." Her words struck a nerve. Paul's laughter grew louder, more forced, as he tried to regain control of the situation. "You think you can stand here and challenge me," he barked, his voice dripping with mockery. "I'm a police officer. The law is on my side. You're just a woman of color who doesn't know her place. Be careful, or you'll find yourself in trouble." The insult wasn't just personal. It was a challenge. Emma could feel the weight of his words pressing down, but she stood tall, her expression unyielding. The supermarket seemed to hold its breath as the tension mounted. Everyone was watching, their eyes flitting between Emma's calm determination and Paul's escalating aggression. Emma took a single step forward, her shoulders squared as though facing an adversary on the battlefield. Her voice, though calm, cut through the tension like a blade. "You may think your arrogance hides your flaws, but it doesn't. I'm not here to fight for power. I'm here to stand against its misuse. And I won't let you continue abusing it." Paul's smug confidence faltered for the briefest moment. His frown deepened as he searched her face for a crack in her composure. But all he saw was unwavering determination. The crowd, now fully engrossed, had grown silent, their phones still recording every moment. "Don't try to act noble," Paul snarled, his voice tinged with desperation. "You're just a troublemaker. If I wanted to, I could have you thrown out of here right now." Emma didn't react to his threat. Instead, the corners of her mouth twitched, a hint of calm defiance in her expression. "If you believe your position gives you the right to act this way, then let the law decide. You're mistaken if you think I'm afraid." The supermarket air was thick with tension, the quiet punctuated by the hushed murmurs of the crowd. Emma, with her unshakable resolve, was a pillar of calm in the chaos. She slowly pulled out her phone, her movements deliberate and without panic. Dialing with steady hands, she spoke into the receiver, her tone measured yet firm. "Hello," she said. "I need assistance at the central supermarket. There's a police officer here abusing his power and threatening others. Please send the appropriate authorities." Paul's eyes widened in shock as the gravity of the situation dawned on him. The crowd, emboldened by Emma's bravery, began murmuring louder. Some stopped recording to place their own calls to the authorities. Paul, his bravado slipping, took an aggressive step toward Emma. "What do you think you're doing?" he bellowed. His voice, once commanding, now sounded desperate. Emma didn't flinch. Her eyes remained locked on his, steady and fearless. "I'm doing what you should be doing, Upholding fairness and accountability, she replied, her voice firm but calm. The piercing wail of police sirens broke through the tense silence, growing louder as they approached. The crowd parted as officers entered the supermarket, their presence commanding immediate attention. Emma turned toward them, her hand pointing firmly at Paul. "This is the individual you need to investigate," she said, her voice clear and unwavering. "His actions have been witnessed and recorded by everyone here." Paul's face drained of color as the reality of the situation set in. The crowd, once passive observers, erupted in whispers, their phones still documenting the unfolding drama. Emma, standing tall amidst the chaos, had proven that courage, integrity, and calm resolve could triumph over arrogance and abuse of power. Here's the expanded and polished version of the continuation. Paul's bravado, once unshakable, crumbled entirely. The smug confidence that had fueled his arrogance dissipated, leaving behind only confusion and unease. His eyes darted nervously around the crowd, now filled with disapproving faces. Emma, however, remained steadfast. Her calm demeanor and poised stature were a stark contrast to Paul's unraveling. She knew she had not only defended herself but had also stood up for the principles of justice and integrity, values that needed to be upheld in every corner of society. The tense atmosphere thickened as the supermarket doors swung open. Mayor Andrew Preston strode in, his presence commanding immediate attention. His sharp eyes scanned the scene, taking in the crowd, the tense faces, and finally landing on Emma. His steps were firm, purposeful, and deliberate, those of a leader prepared to right a wrong. Paul, visibly shaken, took a small step back, his earlier bravado replaced by a look of sheer panic. His head bowed slightly as he tried to cobble together an excuse. "Mr. Mayor, this is just a misunderstanding," he stammered, his voice shaky. "I didn't mean anything. It's just that she..." "Enough." Andrew's voice, though quiet, silenced the room like a thunderclap. His commanding tone cut through Paul's feeble attempt at justification. "I didn't come here for excuses," he said, his eyes piercing. "I came here because of an urgent call from Colonel Emma Anderson, a woman I hold in the highest regard. Your behavior has been reported, witnessed, and documented by countless individuals. Don't think for a second that your flimsy justifications can erase the harm you've caused." Emma stood firm, her expression calm but resolute. She allowed herself a brief exhale of relief, knowing justice was finally taking its course. But her demeanor reminded everyone watching that this was just one battle in a much larger fight. Mayor Preston turned to Emma, his stern gaze softening with genuine concern. "Colonel Anderson," he said, his voice respectful, "are you unharmed? This behavior is unacceptable and will be dealt with to the fullest extent." "I'm fine," Emma replied, her voice steady yet filled with purpose. "But this isn't just about me. It's about accountability for those in power. If I hadn't stood up today, there would be countless others subjected to this kind of injustice. That's what I'm fighting for." Andrew nodded, his expression hardening again as he turned back to Paul. "You have not only abused your authority, but you've also insulted a high-ranking military officer and tarnished the trust the public places in the police force. You don't deserve to wear that uniform." At that moment, a woman stepped forward from the crowd, her phone in hand. "Here," she said, offering the device to Andrew. "I recorded everything." Andrew reviewed the footage briefly, his face growing grimmer with every second. He handed the phone back to the woman and turned to the police officers who had arrived on the scene. "Strip him of his weapon and badge immediately," he ordered. "An investigation will begin at once, and he will face the consequences of his actions." The officers moved swiftly, removing Paul's badge and weapon as the crowd erupted into applause. It was not just a celebration of justice but also a tribute to Emma's courage and the mayor's decisive action. Paul stood motionless, his face drained of all color. The arrogance that once defined him was gone, replaced by humiliation and fear. As he was escorted out of the supermarket and into a waiting police car, the crowd's critical gaze and murmured disapproval followed him like a shadow. Outside, Andrew turned back to Emma, his expression a mix of admiration and determination. "Colonel Anderson," he said, his tone filled with respect, This city needs people like you. People who remind us of our responsibility and integrity. I deeply regret what you endured today. Emma met his gaze, her eyes shimmering with a mixture of gratitude and resolve. Thank you, Mayor Preston, she replied. But this isn't just about me. My only hope is that today's events lead to real change, not just for me, but for everyone. Andrew nodded solemnly. We'll make sure of it, he said firmly. As Emma stepped out into the sunlight, she felt a wave of relief wash over her. But she also knew that this moment, though significant, was just the beginning. The fight for fairness, justice, and accountability was far from over, and she was ready to keep fighting for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. Paul, now stripped of his badge and weapon, sat in silence as the police car drove him to the station. His earlier arrogance was gone, replaced by a quiet, defeated demeanor. The weight of his actions bore down on him, and he seemed to shrink under the invisible burden of public scorn. At the station, the investigation began immediately. Witness statements, video evidence, and public outrage formed a mountain of irrefutable proof against him. The head of the police department, informed of the incident by Mayor Preston, issued a damning statement. This behavior is an indelible stain on our force, and we will take every necessary step to restore public trust. The fallout from the incident was swift and far-reaching. On the very same day, Paul Smith was officially suspended from duty and faced a comprehensive investigation into his conduct. News of his abuse of power and mistreatment of Emma Anderson spread like wildfire, igniting outrage both locally and nationally. Videos capturing his behavior circulated widely on social media, accumulating millions of views and sparking heated debates. As the public demand for accountability grew louder, individuals who had suffered at Paul's hands in the past came forward, sharing their own stories of mistreatment. Their voices added to the mounting evidence against him, painting a damning picture of a man who had wielded his authority recklessly. For Paul, the fall from grace was devastating. Once proud of his rank and the power it afforded him, he now found himself isolated. Former colleagues expressed their disappointment in his actions, and those who once called him a friend distanced themselves. Alone in his modest home, Paul sat in silence, the weight of his mistakes pressing heavily on him. The arrogance that had once defined him was gone, replaced by regret and a dawning awareness of the consequences of his choices. Meanwhile, Emma Anderson's life took on a new dimension. Despite her humility and reluctance to seek attention, she became a symbol of courage and integrity. The community showered her with gratitude and admiration, recognizing her actions as a catalyst for change. Emma's stand against Paul Smith had far-reaching implications. Not only did it lead to his eventual dismissal and legal charges, including abuse of power and threats with a weapon, but it also sparked a broader conversation about ethics and accountability in law enforcement. Seminars and workshops on these topics were organized, with Emma often invited as a keynote speaker. Standing before packed audiences, Emma recounted her story, not for applause or accolades, but to inspire others. Power, she would say, is meaningful only when it is used to protect, not to oppress. Her words resonated deeply, igniting hope and resolve in those who listened. As for Paul Smith, his life took a darker turn. Stripped of his badge, weapon, and dignity, he faced public trials where he could no longer avoid the consequences of his actions. Gone was the proud, confident man. In his place stood a humbled individual, bowing his head as the evidence against him was laid bare. The community he once served turned its back on him, and his former allies could no longer defend his behavior. In his solitude, Paul began to grasp the bitter truth. His arrogance and abuse of power had not only harmed others but also led to his own downfall. Emma, however, continued to embody resilience and determination. While her actions made her a modern-day hero in the eyes of many, she remained grounded, viewing her efforts as a duty rather than an achievement. She returned to her military career with the same unwavering commitment, serving as a living example of integrity and courage. The reforms sparked by Emma's actions began to take root. Local police departments faced increased scrutiny, and changes were implemented in recruitment and training processes. Workshops on ethics and accountability became standard, and law enforcement officers were encouraged to uphold the values of dignity and respect in all situations. Emma's story reached far beyond the realm of policing. Her courage became a beacon of hope, particularly for women and marginalized communities who often faced discrimination. To them, she was more than a soldier or a hero. She was proof that standing up against injustice could lead to meaningful change. Over time, Emma's legacy grew. Articles, videos, and documentaries captured her journey, inspiring countless individuals to confront injustice in their own lives. Her steadfast resolve and quiet humility became a model for future generations, showing that true strength lies in doing what is right, even when the odds are stacked against you. For Emma, the incident with Paul Smith was not the end of her story, but the beginning of a greater mission. She dedicated herself to fostering justice and equality, not just in her professional life, but in every aspect of her existence. She believed that true legacy was not measured by fame or accolades, but by the positive change one leaves in the hearts of others. And so, Emma Anderson's name became synonymous with integrity, courage, and the unwavering pursuit of justice. Her story continues to inspire, a reminder that even in the face of adversity, one person's actions can spark a ripple effect of change, shaping a more just and equitable society for all. Emma Anderson had come to a profound realization. Injustice was not an isolated incident but a systemic issue deeply rooted in society. It wasn't enough to address one case or rely on a few exceptional individuals to spark change. True transformation required a collective effort, a movement that inspired people from all walks of life to stand up and demand fairness. Each story of oppression and abuse that reached her ears weighed heavily on Emma's heart, fueling her sense of responsibility. She knew that change had to start at the roots, and she was determined to be the catalyst. Emma began to devote herself to organizing call-to-action campaigns, using her voice and her platform to reach both those in positions of power and those who felt powerless. She frequently emphasized a powerful message in her speeches. Each of us has the right to say no to the abuse of power, and each of us can make a difference. Her initiatives were as bold as they were inclusive. Emma worked tirelessly to bridge the gap between law enforcement and the civilian community, holding workshops, public forums, and media campaigns to encourage meaningful dialogue. She called on police officers and military personnel to reconsider their roles, not as enforcers of authority but as protectors of justice and equality. Emma also reached out to marginalized groups, those who felt unheard or unseen in society. Her message was clear and empowering. Justice is a fundamental right, not a privilege, and no one should feel too small or insignificant to demand it. She urged them to find their voices, to stand up even in the face of overwhelming power. Through her efforts, Emma's determination grew stronger. The cautious approach she had taken before had evolved into unwavering resolve. She understood that every speech she gave, every workshop she held, and every campaign she launched could create ripples of change. These actions might not topple the system overnight, but they planted seeds for a long-term, sustainable transformation. Her work was not without its challenges. Many were resistant to change, dismissing her efforts as idealistic or unnecessary. Others doubted whether an individual could truly influence a system so entrenched in its ways. But Emma refused to be deterred. She believed in the power of solidarity and the collective strength of individuals united by a common cause. Emma's fight was no longer just her own. It was for everyone who couldn't speak up for themselves, for those who had been silenced by fear or oppression. It was for the fairer society she envisioned, one where justice was not a privilege for the few but a right for all. Her movement gained momentum, touching lives across communities and inspiring others to take action. Emma's tireless efforts turned her personal struggle into a powerful and growing movement, a beacon of hope that reminded people everywhere. Justice must be defended, not for one person, but for the entire community. With each step she took, Emma was reshaping the world around her. She knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, and she accepted that not everyone would stand by her side. But she also believed, with all her heart, in the potential for change and the ability of every individual to make a difference. And so Emma's journey continued, not as a lone hero, but as the leader of a movement that stood for courage, integrity, and the unyielding belief that justice was worth every challenge and sacrifice.